singles make this such a big deal.
Well, and it is a big deal to clarify.
It is a big deal to come into somebody's life. Like, but I mean, why they make it such a big deal to eliminate somebody because they have a kid?
Well, let's talk red flags with this for a second. It is a big deal because it's a blended family. And whenever you have blended families, you know, it's just a new added element. The thing about marriage is, and you guys know this, but I'm just talking to our singles. It's hard, it's work. You got to work hard at marriage. I always say it's the hardest and greatest thing you'll ever do. So that's the hope. And that's also the reality, It's because you've got somebody that, will ride for you forever. And it's your partner, right? Not in crime, but in, ministry, but and that's the beauty of it is like, man, unconditional. But it's the hardest thing too, because marriage is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you holy, and in making you holy, you become happy, right? So that's the thing. So with that being said, it's already work. So you add in a kid overnight and someone else you have to collaborate with who didn't work in the first place. You got to now figure that out, and then that's a new dynamic. And I believe that, the therapist would say the more dynamics you have in your relationship, the harder the relationship is. The more dynamics. What's a dynamic? A kid, what's a dynamic? A stepdad. A biological dad. What's a dynamic? In-laws. Yeah. Another dynamic. Oh, you travel all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, you do this.
Yeah.
Oh, you're president of the United States. Like these are dynamics in marriage, right? It's like the more dynamics and the more dynamic your marriage is, the harder it's going to be to work through, the more difficult, the more complex. That's not to say that you don't have hope. The question is, do you have capacity?
Right.
Which is another conversation. But I do think that's a part of it. But go ahead, please, JJ.
Well, I was just going to say, because you mentioned that idea when you were talking to the men about what you can do to prepare for marriage. And you say, marriage is going to be difficult. Throw in financial challenges and issues, and you're going to make it 10 times more difficult. And that is an added element, an added challenge. I mean, my mind goes to you got a big obstacle course in front of you that is marriage. That's going to be grueling. Yeah. It's going to be challenging. Throwing in a kid in there and a blended family, you're adding in like one of those huge marine rope ladders. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be traveling all the time. Well, here's another
you struggle perpetually with depression or mental health issues.
Right.
Okay, that's a dynamic.
Like you're going to face that, and it's going to be in that obstacle course. So you kind of get to choose ahead of time. Like, it's not a question of if. This is going to be there, and it is going to be challenging, and it's going to require a ton of character, endurance, wisdom, patience. So just be prepared ahead of time, because it will be a challenge. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but that for me is wisdom. Yeah, and that's wisdom for me. You look at a person, you see their story, you see the kid with them, you see that they may be still healing from this abusive marriage. I know that if I pursued and date and marry this person, it is going to be more challenging than marrying another person. Just that is the realistic, and there's hope in that too.
That's what you probably thought too in marrying me.
Absolutely.
To an extent.
I read Kate's book, and when I saw, there was emotional abuse, there was physical abuse, there was huge, big T, capital T trauma in her past that was external.
Let alone things I don't write about in the book because I can't.
Right. For me, I'm like, well, she's amazing in who she is today. And this is also still part of her story. And there are scars and there is trauma. And I know that if I do pursue and, marry her, there is going to be challenges that come with that. Mm-hmm. It's to not all extent, right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Yep.
But you're marrying there.
If you have zero emotional capacity, if you were a man with zero emotional capacity, that would not be a good fit.
Right. But, Sam, if I had to put myself in your shoes, you probably had somewhat of an idea that was, maybe, blinded by infatuation, but you're a pastor. Like you're not ignorant or unwise.
Yeah, I think in regards to, one, I knew for the most part what I was walking into, aside from the timepiece. And I think the waiting was more important, one, to set us up for better success in the first few years, because it was dark, and we talk about that all the time. That was the punishment that Andy and Reggie knew would be coming. You walking into the cave, brother, by just not waiting. And I actually think it was unfair to Tony, and it was unfair to me. It was unfair to, but it really was unfair to, it was unfair to both of us. And here's why. Tony should not have to heal in a new marriage, because she needs time. Like, she went through so much in her first. It would have been better for her. And I found myself in all of us apologizing, even to her, of like, man, I'm sorry you have to like try to figure out how to fast track trusting again and all of these things, because I need you to do that because we married now, right? And it's like, and she can't be like, well, you married me, so I give me time to trust you. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's almost like her healing had this new external pressure from the demands of you and marriage.
And it's 100% not fair.
Right.
To her, for me to be like, well, just get it together. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it wasn't fair to her, what she would agree with, and also obviously not fair to me, because now I'm like in this new thing and I'm having to go through. And so I didn't get the short end of the stick. We both did. And so that's one of the things we would say, kind of in the waiting. But to talk kids and why, and what I think it comes down to for those that are listening that are going, all right, cool. So what's the red flag?
Yeah.
I would say, we've given you the outline, but I think what it all comes down to at the end of the day is the woman or the man that you're talking to. The reason, and this is what changed for me immediately, because I did not want to marry a woman with a kid. She knows this. We talked about it. It all went out of the window when I met her. And so, and it all went out of the window because I'm like, well, if I'm gonna get this, I'll deal with whatever. It was just like, and so, and I knew that she would, and these were and we'll go into a little bit of our journey, because we've actually not had a problem with Dylan and her ex. We had like one issue in the beginning. We crushed it. And since like that, we've not had a problem at all. But that was a part of it for me. It was, who is Tony going to be, and how can her and I collaborate on this situation with her, on the child? And so I had a few things that I needed and that I said were deal breakers for me if we were going to do this. And one was, hey, here's the order, right? It's if we have a belief system of biblical marriage, and so that's the nuclear family, that's husband and wife, but it also is spiritual headship from the male. And so that doesn't mean extreme submission, because that's what it's meant for years, right? Well, spiritual headship from the man means the woman is a slave. It's like, that's not what we're talking about. How we describe biblical marriage and submission at our church is about when we can agree, who gets the last say. And in some cases, but we're going to do everything we can to agree. And in some cases, we like to say this all the time, if we don't agree, we don't move forward. Right. So that's one of the cases as well. But there are times and moments in which decisions have to be made because the family has to move forward. And in that case, when the decision has to be made, the man is held responsible. We say that ultimately the man is held responsible for this health and the spiritual depth of the relationship. The woman plays a part, obviously. Right. So it's not a cop out on any side. So with that being said, my biggest thing was, hey, if I'm leading the house spiritually, I need the last say so on what we do in our house and what we don't do. And so that includes Dylan. So when she's here, these are the rules of the house. And she was like, cool, And so that agreement was very important for her and I. I needed to know that I could lead. And I believe she needed to know that she could trust me to lead and trust me with the decisions. And so in that regard, now it's her daughter, right? So
Yeah.
like we also had to come to an agreement on that. I'm like, look, it's biologically, right? She's my daughter in terms of I've inherited this. I'm stepdad, I'm bonus
Yeah.
dad, I'm all of these things. But if we go biological, right, like she's her biological mother and her ex is the biological father. And so with that being said, she has to have last say so on Dylan in terms of
Right.
discipline and all that. I have last say so on house.
Yes.
Does that
Yeah.
make
Makes
sense?
sense. Yes.
Makes total
100%.
sense.
So with that being said, those are, if we couldn't agree on that, red flag.
Right.